that, as I was reminded this morning, that we are recreating this congregation, this space, by being here this morning. All of us, we are inviting this space to be. And I need to sound the bell. Invite it, no, let me say that again. I need to invite the bell to sound in order to help bring me back to myself, out of the hurry and the scramble and the have to and the get done and the being a little bit late and looking at the clock and getting ready for this morning. I need to invite the bell to remember to breathe, come back into myself, and be present with this day, with this community, with this place and time.
Recording in progress.
Now we ring the bell, we invite the bell to sound in order to call us back into covenant. We are on the unceded land of the Muwekma tribe of the Ohlone people. They were displaced, colonized, their land was taken. Now they seek to regain their land as well as pass on their heritage, customs, and culture to their descendants, to their children. Everything we do to restore their rights, equality, and sovereignty is working our way back into covenant with the land and with the people. We invite the bell to sound to call us back into relationship with ourselves and with one another, to recognize broken promises, unhealed hurts, lingering scars where being right was more important than being whole. That was just this morning. We intentionally gather to invite an ever-widening circle of compassion, commitment, and solidarity until we are all beloved to one another. We invite this bell to sound, to call us into relationship with our children and our children's children, out to the 7th generation, helping us to realize that what we do now or fail to do will be felt by those who come after us. What we do with our lives matters, and a caring world is possible after all.
Good morning. I'm Paul Davis. I'm your worship associate this morning, and Reverend Jim McKinley is our worship leader this morning. You may notice 2 empty chairs over in the choir. That's because Jim and I are both singing in the choir this morning, which we enjoy doing because we love music, but it may involve some shuffling back and forth, but I think you've seen that before. As I looked over Reverend Jim's service description and tried to think what might I say to call us to worship this morning, I was reminded of an analogous experience of mine, in fact one we've all been through, the advent of the COVID-19 pandemic, which I was guided through by my daughter to some extent. She is a biology professor. She was very up on the progress of the pandemic. In fact, she was one of the leads at San Jose State University for following the research work and giving advice. And she said, this is not a 2-week thing. It's not a 2-month thing. This is a 2 or more year thing. And attempts to get out of it early may actually lengthen it. So what do you do when you're stuck in something and it's going to last a certain amount of time and you better not try to get out of it? You just got to do it. So I got my own Zoom license, being led by such luminaries here at our congregation like Steve Walcave really launched us into doing services over the internet. I offered my services to several organizations that I belong to so we could keep our meetings going. When the choirs stopped practicing, including the bell choir, which some of us from our congregation play in together with the Methodists, I launched a special Zoom at bell choir practice time, which I called Bells and Voices. Any musical person in either congregation could connect, and we could talk about what we're doing musically, or what computer programs we had just found that might help us make music individually. And we were very well led at the time also by Drew Wilson and Shauna Pickett-Gordon, whom I thank. We figured out how to do things anyway. I mean, you just got to do what's there before you to be done in some circumstances. So with that, and I hope I have led properly into the service, which Reverend Jim has prepared, which I'm sure I hope he's better prepared than I am. I was out of town all day yesterday, and I'm so busy with Christmas season rehearsals. But let us worship together now. And we start by lighting a chalice. So we have our standard chalice lighting words. Ah, yes, they have appeared on the screen. So please recite together with me. We light this chalice to remind ourselves to treat all people kindly because we are all one family, to take good care of the earth because it is our home, to live lives full of goodness and love because that is how we will become the best people we shall be.
Good morning. Welcome to Mission Peak Unitarian Universalist Congregation. My name is Beth Schaefer. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm a member of the board. We're so glad you've joined us this morning. I'm going to start out by highlighting one important announcement, and that is an announcement from Ariel and Lisa Newstrom, and it's very important. The cookie decorating and holiday sing-along party is this Saturday here in Cole Hall from 3 to 5 p.m. This sounds like so much fun. Vaughn will be here to lead us in song. Children are welcome to come early for an optional singing practice session if they'd like. And RSVP is encouraged. See the week on the Peak for more information or to reach out to Lisa Newstrom or to Ariel. Sounds like a very festive start to our December calendar. If you're our guest for the first time, we welcome you. Here's a bit of information on how our hybrid services work. We use chat in Zoom or our book near the welcome table to share joys and concerns. These are personal milestones of importance which will be read aloud in the service. We also have social hour after the service where we can get to visit with one another in breakout rooms or on the patio. The worship host will give you more information about this immediately after the service. Someone from our membership team will put a link to our weekly newsletter in chat so that you can see all the events coming up. We encourage you to join anything that speaks to you. We also put our welcome email, welcome@mpuuc.org, to request a newsletter or other information be sent to you. If you're here in person, our welcome table is right over there where you can sign up to receive a newsletter or ask any questions you may have. Finally, please make sure your mobile devices are silenced. We're so glad to be together today. And let's end by asking everyone in Zoomlandia and everyone in Call Hall to wave to one another and feel the joy of being one large beloved community. Welcome and thank you to all our members and friends near and far.
Please rise as you're willing and able in body or in spirit, and we'll sing 1031, Filled with Loving Kindness. And one of the things to be aware of is that the song is the same, but it moves from, there's a movement here. May I be well, may I be filled with loving kindness. May you be filled with loving kindness. May we all. So it's just I, you, and we. Our Time for All Ages this morning has a classic beginning in the title. It's called The Frog Prince. There once was a little girl who was walking beside a creek when she happened to see a frog that looked very sad. You can imagine a wide frog mouth looking very sad. I wonder why that frog is so sad, she asked herself. Then she remembered a story once told by her mother about how a girl had kissed a frog and how the frog had magically turned into a handsome prince. Maybe that is why the frog is so sad. No one will kiss it so that it can become a prince. She decided that she should give the frog a kiss herself. But when she did, nothing happened. There was still a frog sitting in her hand. That's a part of the story you should really focus on. It's still sitting in her hand. She set the frog back on the ground and said, "Poor froggy, I'm sorry, I couldn't turn you into a handsome prince." The frog replied, "Oh, but you have done something far better. You have made me a happier frog." And the frog hopped off with a great big smile on his face. So if you're walking through the woods one day and you happen to see a little girl picking up frogs and kissing them, don't try to stop her. She knows what she is doing. Frogs need love too, you know. You may not be able to see the frog change on the outside, but believe me, a little love and attention makes everyone feel like royalty on the inside. If you wonder about the story, there are lots of things to wonder about. It could have been a boy or the little girl. The little girl could have kissed the frog because she thought they wanted to be a beautiful princess. For some of you, you might wonder about the science and health of all of this. It's probably not a good idea to go around kissing frogs. That's the science piece. So don't do it. But back to the story. I wonder if when the little girl paid attention to him, the frog liked himself and wanted just to be himself. Enough of this prince business. I'm just me. And maybe that's what made him happier. He could be him and be happy too. With the help of the little girl, he then gave himself a little love and attention. I wonder, what do you wonder? And that's the awesomeness of stories. Thank you.
As a congregation, we need to share our time, our talents, and our financial resources. Yes, it takes a little more than hugging each other to keep this congregation going. We can fulfill our pledges and make donations to our congregation in several ways: by check in the mail, by bank bill processes, by PayPal on our website, and by checking an envelope through the slot in our office door. And I think I'm not reading the current words, but I think that doesn't matter. The details are on display up there. They can also be seen on our website at mpuuc.org/Zoom, for instance. And in our order of service, we have a limited number of them, but you can look around. I'm sure you can figure out how to get your money to us. We are grateful to all. The little frog heart of our accountant will warm up, and we will be able to pay our rent to the Methodists and salary to our minister and our music director. Choir director. Music director is a step up if we have a little bit more money to pay him for more of his time. We are grateful to all and dedicate funds received to the purposes of the congregation. And we actually do have baskets here in the hall.
That allows us to find hope and meaning, especially in the hard times, is the love and support that we show one another, that we share with one another. So at this time, if you have a joy or concern that by sharing with this community might bring the encouragement or resilience you are needing, please write it briefly now in the chat or in the book. Please write your name and whether you're sharing is a joy or a concern. And it's still where I need, when I read these off, I need your first name. If you are here in person, you can use the book by the welcome table. And if you would like, you can place a stone in the stone garden for a joy or concern while the music plays, while Vaughn plays, while we're putting the stones down. If your need is personal, you can also send an email to our minister, pastoral minister, Barbara Myers, or to me for a follow-up conversation. And I think our emails are listed. I know mine is revjim@mpuuc.org. Please come forward if you'd like to drop a stone. One thing in the chat is a request that if we could, it would be a joy if we could see the choir while they were singing. And finally, one last stone for the hopes and hurts, still too tender to escape our heart, or that we have just chosen to keep in our heart and in silence this morning. May, for the sake of love, keep our doors, our hearts, our minds, and our arms open to fill the need. Our reading this morning is a familiar piece, number 602 in your hymnal, if you have the gray hymnals there, and online we're going to put up a slide. It's the piece, If There Is to Be Peace, by Lao Tzu. If there is to be peace in the world, there must be peace in the nations. If there is to be peace in the nations, there must be peace in the cities. If there is to be peace in the cities, there must be peace between neighbors. If there is to be peace between neighbors, there must be peace in the home. And if there is to be peace in the home, there must be peace in the heart. Lao Tzu's reading, I realize, is familiar to many of us. And like family, it's easy to take it for granted. Yeah, we've heard that. And we don't really hear it. This time, as I've paused and reflected on if there is to be peace, I see it in a little different light. It illuminates new thoughts. If you notice, the translation is organized in pairs, and each pair is a move from larger to smaller, less personal to more personal. Each pair is a sentence, and each pair is a movement of responsibility from a possibility or a hope to a requirement or action. Period. Done. In light of today's reflection, I realized after all these years that I wanted to add another sentence to the end of Lao Tzu, a new pairing, so that peace in the heart becomes responsible for itself. And I feel both its possibility and responsibility. Peace in the heart becomes me, in my heart. It settles and shelters in place. The hope then becomes both the practice and the acknowledgement of the home that is sought. It comes within reach, within me, and then it becomes real. Not abstract, it's just real. If there is to be peace in the heart, there must be peace in my heart. I wrote in my notes that it sounds obvious, redundant, and yet it means everything. Amidst all that would take us away from ourselves, amidst the constant bombardment of outside circumstances, anxiety, and fear, the foundation of the peace that is to be is in me. It is mine. It must be. It must, in capital letters, be, B-E. I got to own it.
jolly rotten. There's something you've forgotten, and that's to laugh and sing and flouncing.
When you're feeling in the dumps, don't be silly chumps. Just purse your lips and whistle, that's the theme. And always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the right side of life. For life is quite absurd, and death the final word. You must always face the curtain with a bow.
Forget about your secret, cut the audience again. Enjoy it, it's your last chance anyhow.
Always look on the bright side of death. Just before you draw your terminal breath. For life is quite absurd, and death's the final word. Life's a laugh and death's a joke, it's true. You'll see it's all a show, keep them laughing as you grow. Just remember that the last laugh is on you. Ready? Peggy! Everybody! Always look on the bright side of life. Always look on the bright side of life. Side of life. Side of life. Side of life.
No comment. That's awesome. I should have started off this a lot differently, but you have to experience the anthem before you realize what's coming next. So, hello. And thank you for being here and for asking me into this special community of yours. By doing this, you actually helped me have those spaces to pull away from easy distractions and do the work of organizing and deepening my reflections. You encouraged me. You actually gave me courage, or back to what we were saying, you gave me heart to be with myself so that then I could be with you. So thank you. Let me state what may seem obvious but needs to be said up front, particularly now. These reflections are mine. They come through my extraordinarily privileged life as a healthy, able, white American male who is retired with what I need, and who, at least for a few years, doesn't have to work for a living anymore. When you think about it, that's very, very privileged. So any struggle I talk about happens within the context of my privilege. Any insights come with that confession, that ownership, that embrace. I hope they have some general application and you find something in them useful. The reflections I share this morning have helped me glimpse love and practice peace within my inner difficulties and reach beyond anger and fear and defensiveness into more generous compassion and understanding, or at least that's how I see it. The movement, however slight, is significant. It's real movement nonetheless. Like the reading, it's both a point of departure and a place of arrival at the same time. And I wish we could share our thinking together as a conversation. The trip I'm going to talk about actually happened just before the pandemic. We entered the trip not in the thinking we were in the pandemic and then came back and we were. It was when we could make travel plans and before we all began sheltering in place. And right then, I spent most of that December and the first several days of January, so that's 2019, 2020, with 15 other people as part of a self-guided, self-supported raft trip through the Grand Canyon. We celebrated the holidays and ushered in the new year there. It was as wonderful and as challenging a trip as I've ever experienced. It was transformative, and I almost didn't go. 30 years ago, I'd worked a couple of seasons at the Nana Hill Outdoor Center. I was offered a chance to work on a trip through the canyon then, but thinking I would do it another time, I went to Costa Rica instead. Life changed, and that time never came back around. Until 2019, when my daughter Hannah and her Adventure Treks friends got a permit and asked me to go with them. I guess I'd never really let go of thinking that it might happen someday, but I'd always pictured that someday as warm. I'd also never been confronted with what it meant to actually go on that kind of adventure in my late 60s. The adventure I once knew better how to do way back when, and that had seemed simply exciting then, had become more unknown and concerning. But it is the Grand Canyon after all. It is the Colorado River. And Hannah, my daughter Hannah, and her partner Jack were encouraging me to go. They'd invited me. They tugged on me and they gave me heart. How could I turn them down or be with myself later if I didn't go? Oh, and did I mention anything about their permit being in December? As a heading to my notes when I was putting this together, this next section is labeled How Difficult. But about a week into the trip, I was really struggling. I mentioned how much I don't like cold, and then I hate being cold and wet. I love river water sports, so go figure. I hate being cold and wet. The canyon was every bit of both. We lived in dry suits for 28 days. The water temperature was in the 50s. The air temperature highs were in the 50s. It's like being in the ocean here. Most of the day was in the shade of a low winter sun blocked by 2 billion years of rock. I was also new to outdoor adventure where I felt old. I didn't know how to trust my body in those conditions. And that affected how I could trust myself. The rest of the group were all 25 to 40 years old, and most of them were highly skilled and experienced outdoor leaders. Camp routine and timing is second nature to them. I often felt like an outsider. I was dealing with not only the unknowns of winter and water, but also the social unknowns of how to be the older guy. That was all on me, but it was nonetheless real. I only really knew Hannah and Jack. There was so much to do morning and night: boats, camp, food, personal gear, health and hygiene, even on your days off. All that, and there was a river to run. I was one of the team and not sure I could keep up and do my part. I was alone in and with my thoughts. I was more alone than I'd anticipated. My aloneness and loneliness surprised me and caught me off guard. When I finally got the right moment to talk with my daughter Hannah, this all came spilling out. And I actually feel emotional telling you about it. The part I remember is that she listened, she made some comments, and then said with simple, quiet emphasis, "Dad, you gotta own it. You gotta own it." That's the quote. I wanted her to, sympathize with me and talk with me about it. She said, "Dad, you gotta own it." Here's the paraphrase. You got to make this yours. You got to be you. You got to be good with you. You and your 67 years at that time, you got to feel it, do it, live it in the here and now. This was one of those aha moments you hope for, where simple words make lasting impressions and carry bigger meanings. It was my wake-up call. In the middle of the Grand Canyon, there is no place to run. There is no way to get away. There are no distractions. In the canyon, there is literally no way out, only through. There is nothing else. As somebody in the audience said, can you climb up? Nope. There is nothing else. You better own it. What follows is my commentary. That moment helped me stop and breathe and focus and feel my breath. I was alive and awake, and I was going to stay that way and somehow enjoy doing it. I was in the Grand Canyon, after all. It was a move into mindfulness. Breathe in, breathe out. What had been swirling around settled into me and I into it. Although I didn't think of it this way then, it was every bit a spiritual shift and a spiritual awakening. The realities hadn't changed, but what had? My spirit had. My spirit with which and in which I faced and lived my reality had come awake and alive in the cold. By owning me, my mental fights and anxieties faded, and I got on with bringing more of what I had. I lived into the life in front of me more. In the language of Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh and his concept of engaged witness, I was able to notice my struggle and not so much be the struggle. It was still a struggle. I was able to notice my fears and not be them. The more I practiced that mindfulness, the more the beauties of the canyon, the trip, the people, and even of myself opened before me and shone amidst the hardships. I enjoyed it. There is a freedom that comes with owning who you are and what is in front of you. Energy is freed up to better deal with what you have to deal with. If in such moments you find yourself smiling, even a little, recognize and value that smile as both a gentle indicator and generator of new life energy. As I said, nothing going on outside me had changed. Nothing. And yet everything changed. I became less defensive to myself and my internal critical committee, and then less defensive, more generous, present, and available to others. I became less reactive and more able to respond. I stepped back less and I engaged more. I became more response-able for that which I was responsible. I didn't look to others or changes in the circumstances to make it better, but I was always grateful and appreciative when they did. Correction here, the phrase, you got to own it, can seem problematic. There's power and possession and history in it. Own alone can be a possessive word. I own that. But in this moment, the phrase came from my daughter and out of her awareness and love. I experienced it with love all around it, and I might replace it with embrace. You got to embrace it. I use it with that sense. Embrace myself. Hold myself in safety and appreciation. But I still think sometimes I need the swagger and the push of that moment and that own it gives. It brings me to attention in a way that embrace just can't quite do in some moments when I say to myself, okay, own it, Jim. The smile that arises and the nod that comes with it captures the embrace. I got it. We're good. We're good. Let's go. To put this more in the language that Paul was referencing from the months of sheltering in place, the more I was able to shelter into my reality, the more I owned it, then became more my own shelter. I became more my refuge, even my own sanctuary. The more I embraced my reality, the more I was then able to be in me and respond to my situation, and the less I merely reacted to what was around me. I felt much less pushed around and defined by what I wanted to avoid or wished were different. In the months that followed, I was surprised by how much the canyon had prepared me for the pandemic. As Paul said, the pandemic is a canyon journey. There's no way out, only through. We are getting through this together. So here's a couple of examples of what I mean by that. When we came back this Saturday in late May, remember when the streets opened up again? And I drove Main Street in Hendersonville for the first time, and there were a lot of people, and yet on the whole street I saw only one person wearing a mask. So I felt myself starting to get tense. I started to get angry. I started to feel threatened and excluded. I started to go global. Then I remembered to breathe and own it. You got to own it, Jim. And in that moment, the energy and fear that had been building up drained away. I smiled to myself, and Main Street returned to being something to do or not, and only if I saw a way that felt safe. The co-op where I shopped for groceries was a different situation because I have to get food, and they didn't require masks. Remember shopping first thing in the early mornings to have that space? Yeah. But that particular Sunday, as I navigated my way around, there was a couple who weren't wearing masks, and I felt my chest begin to tighten up. I thought about speaking to them, and then I realized they were affecting my enjoyment of my whole shopping trip. They didn't even know me. And then I remembered to breathe and own my situation. I took a moment, reversed my grocery list, and changed my route. Then later in the week, I asked the manager nicely to consider at least a 2-hour block once or twice a week where masks were required for shopping. It was a good, easy talk. And then I actually enjoyed waiting to see what would happen. And he put in mask-required times for us to shop. Also, when I owned it, I realized that there were moments for me to reach beyond my anger and fear and defensiveness. There was that embrace that allows for more self-compassion and appreciation to move into the space. One of the examples that came to me this week was that, I've forgotten the year, but if you remember back in North Carolina, we had what was called the bathroom bill. If you remember that, right? And fighting the bathroom bill was making just gender-neutral bathrooms was the deal. But in our protest, I challenged people to offer a transgender 101 class. The UUA had offered it. And Alex Capitan, I was the only person who could present it, and I'm not embodied in exactly the right way to do this, you know? But I was the only person, and we had 50 people come for one and then 50 for the second. Well, Alex Capitan, who opens it, he said, and I was worried that I wouldn't get it right. You know, I didn't know all the terms and all this. And Alex said, all I ask you to do is to bring an attitude of curiosity and wonder. And that released me from my defensiveness. That released me from my fears. And I was able to embody myself as I am and own it and what that means. And then from there, move into the space. That owning it has also allowed me to move into recognizing my privilege and all these different examples in a way that frees me up, not from responsibility, but allows me to be more response-able in those moments. Recently, I realized that Stephen Batchelor, if you've read his stuff, but it's Buddhism without religion, I think, is one of them. But he's written a book on solitude, and I realized that he's talking about a similar move when he talks about the practice of solitude, not as a retreat or a getting away, but as an embodied practice. He says solitude is really just another way of talking about the person you are. He says we can learn to create a space in which we feel at home and grounded. I think crucially it has to do with refining our capacity to see where our impulses are coming from, he says, to what extent these impulses are just driven by conditioning, habit, and fear, and to what extent we can open up a non-reactive space within us. So solitude, or rather the practice of solitude, is the practice of creating an inward autonomy, he says, within ourselves, an inward freedom from the power of these overwhelming thoughts and emotions. We have to be at home in ourselves before we can be at home with others. He quotes Montaigne, 16th century French philosopher and poet. The greatest thing in the world is to know how to be yourself. You got to own it, Dad. This was my first year when I was in the canyon, so it's December 2019. It was my first Christmas Eve in 21 years where I wasn't leading a service. I was on the Colorado River in the bottom of the Grand Canyon, sitting around a warm fire with a group of the finest people I've ever had the privilege of sharing such an adventure with, in the most glorious cathedral of rocks and stars ever imagined. At some point, Hannah, my daughter Hannah, and I just got up and walked over to the river. In Hendersonville, near the end of the traditional service, someone always read Howard Thurman's The Work of Christmas, just before the congregation lit their candles while singing Silent Night. For the last several years of my ministry there, Hannah had been present in the service, and then she just would walk up front and stand with me as the people lit their candles and then sang their way out. This year, 2019, we stood together on the shore of the river, looking up beyond the walls of the canyon into the Milky Way. We remembered Thurman's words. And so the work of Christmas begins, to find the lost, to heal the broken, and then the piece ends with language that takes us back to the writing of Lao Tzu from our opening reading. And then it ascribes it to the work and practice of Christmas, to bring peace among the brothers and sisters, to make music in the heart. Again, here I would change and add another line, to make music in the heart, to make music in your heart. And to make music in your heart, you got to practice that music a little bit every day. You got to own it. The work of peace begins, your peace begins in your days, in your body, in your heart. Peace. Thank you. Seven, 2 times through, go lifted up.
you may stay standing for our chalice extinguishing, which we will recite together in unison. The words will be appearing on our screens everywhere. What? Have I skipped something? It's up. Great. The monitor over there is not working, so I have to look up there. Okay, together. We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
May the love which overcomes all differences, which heals all wounds, which puts to flight all fears, which reconciles all who are separated, be in us and among us, now and always. Take courage, friends. The way is often hard, the path is never clear, and the stakes are very high. Take courage, for deep down there is another truth. You can say it together. We are not alone. We are not alone. Go in peace.